something that can actually also give benefit to its rural and underserviced areas. How can this climate finance actually help us towards this energy equity? And second, is UNICEF playing any role to have more children responsive, women responsive, and young people responsive energy policies?
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm Raksha, and I'm the Regional Advisor for Climate and Environment at the Regional Office for South Asia, and we are based in Kathmandu. Thanks a lot for the organizers for having us here today, and thank you so much for the question. So I think, first of all, I'll start with the good news. And just as a segue of what Harjit mentioned, so the good news is that in 2023, that's the latest data that we have in global renewable energy, so the capacity and the generation, it grew. And it grew by a record of 36%. While it may sound like a small number, but I think it's, as I said, it's been a record in the last, like several years, almost a decade. And similarly, renewable energy jobs also concurrently, it increased by almost 8 to 10%. And people who have been without reliable sources of energy or access to energy, the number of people have also marginally declined. We haven't done a great job when it comes to SDG 7, meeting the targets, but we are progressively getting there, hopefully. And another good news is that Asia overall is leading when it comes to energy generation globally. So I think this is something for us to celebrate, during some of these dull times. But at the same time, I also wanted to mention that when it comes to South Asia as such, in the region, we are not doing very bad. 20% of our total generation of energy comes from renewable sources. But that said, challenges still persist. 70 to 80% of our energy generation is still fossil fuel based, and that's a significant number. So concurrently, the investments, the global investments on renewable energy, on sustainable energy also grew. It almost grew by $500 to $600 billion from the latest estimates. And we are still far away in order to reach the targets by 2030 of tripling the renewable energy generation or energy capacity to be very specific, and which requires, estimates tell us, almost $2 trillion US dollars per annum. So which means that we are still far ahead, from accomplishing the required targets. But that said, again, I think the smaller gains that we celebrate, one step at a time that we celebrate, again, in the region, community-led action, I think that have the transformational potential. We have witnessed it coming from UNICEF and considering our mandate of working for children and working with children and young people and for the most vulnerable communities. For us, and also speakers ahead of me have mentioned, it's about the ones who are impacted the most vulnerable population. So again, coming from UNICEF, every child here in South Asia, your children, my child, they are all impacted extremely by climate crisis. So I think this hits hard personally, at a personal level as well. And for us, it's also about equitable access to solutions, equitable access to energy as a means of providing the basic sources and the social services that children need in order to grow, in order to survive and thrive. So we have been working, as UNICEF, we've been working globally on clean energy. We have now almost reached 85 countries with our clean energy program globally. Coming closer to home in South Asia, we work very closely with the communities. We work very closely with the local governments, particularly looking into distributed energy, particularly looking into smaller scale of energy systems that are easier to deploy, but that also have high quality social benefits as well. In that, then, carbon finance or climate finance, we heard throughout the day about what we need to do to get prepared, prepare our grounds for accessing climate finance. And let me tell you one thing. I think in all this, the market mechanisms, the private sector is also, there is a strong undercurrent, right? So for me, I think it's not all gloom and doom, but I think the market is going to respond, and I'm quite hopeful in that sense. Cautiously optimistic, but optimistic. And in that case, I'm bringing the example of an innovative market solution, the carbon markets, which we saw in the last two COPs, COP 28 and 29 of the UNFCCC, that there have been positive advancements of how now policies are becoming more responsive. There are more guidelines, and with that, enabling conditions, I'm quite hopeful that the market mechanisms will now also start picking up. So now, why are we talking about carbon markets, right? It provides as an icing on the cake, I would say, to generate some additional revenue stream for communities, for local governments, and overall, I think in terms of investments as well. And also, there is a growth in the carbon markets that we are seeing. The region is obviously doing well, but also governments are now responding in terms of how they can provide better regulatory mechanisms in order to keep the market more vibrant. In all that, UNICEF, I'll just take an example how UNICEF has been supporting the government of Nepal in putting in place a carbon market mechanism. And that is, like through clean energy solutions, through cook stoves program, that has implication and positive health benefits for children and maternal health. So we have a very small sort of a program where we have deployed or supported the local governments in deploying around 12,000 cook stoves in Nepal, and we are expecting a revenue from the carbon market of around over $2 million in the next 5 years. And that revenue directly trickles to the local government and also to the beneficiaries, but also more importantly for us, to children and the most vulnerable community. So just an example,
Thank you. Dr. Pachair, with your permission, I need 6 more minutes, 2 minutes each for the speakers. Rapid fire round, and of course we are talking of regional solutions. We have understood since morning we're talking of multidisciplinary, multi-dimensional issues that no single government, no single department, no single country can tackle. So what's the way forward? Hirjit, how regional collaboration can help us in decarbonizing this region and our economies? 2 minutes.
Sure. So let's accept the reality. I mean, the regional politics at this moment is not in our favor, but that doesn't mean that we should stop the conversation. We can't just depend on politicians to bring us together, and that's why this initiative I really commend, because as media, as civil society, as ordinary citizens, we have to interact with each other. Even if at this moment we are not sharing resources, but we are living in a digital world, we can really pick up examples from each other. We can organize many exchanges without visa so that we can learn from each other and replicate those examples. There's a wonderful work that's happening in Nepal on EV. We are seeing there's a lot of work happening on renewables that we have seen in Pakistan, in India, how we can learn. Sri Lanka has come up with a target of going 100% renewable in the next few years. So there's a lot of inspiring work happening in the region. We need to really start connecting beyond governments, and then we should inspire governments to also interact with each other. But I must also mention that we are really missing coordination when it comes to major climate conferences. You see Africa coordinating, you see small island states, you see Latin America. There's no South Asia level coordination. And I think as civil society, we should bring South Asian community together before such any major conferences. That will bring the spirit of solidarity and cooperation that is absolutely missing at this moment. This could be a great another start for that to happen. And I must take 30 more seconds just to emphasize on the point, while we are talking about regional level cooperation, but a lot of action needs to happen at the very local level. And that should inspire the policies at the national level and regional cooperation. And let's not forget, we need to continue to put pressure on those perpetrators who have caused the problem, because while we can mobilize resources at the domestic level, we cannot let developed countries off the hook, because we are talking about justice and equity.
Thank you. The same question to you, Indrakaji. Way forward for regional collaboration and how UN agencies, they can actually support the governments.
I think Hurjit has answered that very much. I think really reiterating his premise on coming as a caucus in South Asia. Yes, there are challenges. We have perspectives and political issues, but this is cross-cutting. I think it's if I may be colloquial, it's a no-brainer. So we should come together on this, have a common caucus, address the issues that impact all our peoples, and be coherent in the key areas in which the science and the data is very self-evident. There's no need to revisit the data unless you challenge that as a political perspective. I think we also have to improve internally our weak governance, and we have some inconsistent policies, and streamlining our regulatory frameworks would help, and again, a bit more coherence across, including encouraging private-public partnerships. We are very weak in that. In this region also, we have very big companies which are, multinational big entities that can come in and support us in this endeavor. Yes, financial constraints and investment risks are there. We have to de-risk some of this and see how some risk guarantees and concessional funding can come to these endeavors, because there are plenty of innovation that's taking place. So how do you scale it, right? How do you de-risk? You can't expect some of these organizations to scale without de-risking and supporting them through that financial inclusion. And then lastly, I think also really how can we get localized energy and alternate options at community level? Because for us, we still, in a developing countries, we have potential, but we need to scale bottom up as well, my previous point. And then building trust and awareness. I think this is critically important, and here I really want to take my hat off to Dawn Media and the group for doing exactly this on communication, bringing people together. And today is a world where, well, formally, everything was 140 characters, right? I think we need to really be able to get out there, use that as a raising awareness, advocacy, justice issues, and mobilizing us as a collective. And thank you for that, really. I think this is really one of the first opportunities bringing us all together to have this conversation as South Asia to take it to the next level.
Thank you. Dr. Thapa?
Thank you so much. So just 3 points from my side. I think for us, the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, which countries are now preparing and finalizing, and as Dechen rightfully calls it, the investment plan for countries to address climate change. There has to be a meaningful engagement of children and young people when countries are formulating and in terms of implementing the plan later on. Integrate indicators in sectors, in social sectors like water sanitation, in education, in health, so that we are able to track the progress. And also integrate child-specific indicators and considerations, so that our climate action plans are not only responsive to the adults, but they are equally responsive and addresses the unique needs of children and the most vulnerable. The second thing is in terms of, because we are also talking about climate finance, so globally only 2.4%, UNICEF estimates suggest that only 2.4% of the global multilateral climate finance, it goes into sectors that specifically address the needs of children and young people. So children should also have equally meaningful voice and be at the seat to contribute in terms of financing decisions, and also in addition to policy decisions as well. And when it comes to climate programs and actions that we are formulating as adults. And finally, also echoing what other speakers have mentioned, partnerships. I think private sector is critical, especially in the region that we are here right now. So partnership, we cannot do it alone. So public and private sector partnership, looking into the market so that we are able to efficiently drive innovation, and we are able to really increase the level of ambition that is required, as well as drive, programming ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I hand over to Kanakji, Kanakji, I would also like you to touch upon the potential role of SARC in this whole discourse that we have discussed. Of course, Secretariat in Kathmandu and Nepal always took a pride in being a major binding force in South Asia. So do you think that there's still some opportunities in some of the vehicles which are potentially there within SARC that can be utilized to take this regional agenda forward? So while you are summarizing this session, I'll also request you to touch upon this. Thank you very much.
But would you like to have your concluding remarks and answer?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you heard the three speakers with the US withdrawal. I think we have three options. The world have three options. The first option is that we follow the suit. So if US, one of the most polluter and emitter, can walk away from its responsibilities, why should we care? And to me, that would be a collective suicide that no sane mind can endorse. The second option is that as many of the things under executive order they have put on pause, we keep our efforts on pause for next 4 years and wait. Maybe there is some change in heart or mind in Washington that can take this agenda forward. And the third is to fill in the vacuum, taking a leadership role. So the opportunities and the chances that are there due to the withdrawal of United States from many of the forums, I think the regions and countries like us, we need to be in a more leading role, and we need to fill in the vacuum. And the three speakers here, I think they pointed out towards that leadership role. We need to collaborate, we need to cooperate, we need to take these responsibilities collectively, these challenges collectively, and emerge as a new leader on this climate change, if not for our sake, for our future generation's sake, without which it would be difficult. And as I said in the beginning, that this development and decarbonization, economic development and decarbonization, they are not two sides of a coin. They are actually now parallels, and we have to take both of them together. Thank you very much, all three, for making us more educated on this topic and for enlightening us. And over to you.
Yeah, I'll pick it up from here. Thank you. Thank you, Surari Saab. And I will refer to the SARC matter that you raised. Very briefly, in my concluding remarks, and not by way of summarizing such a vast arena that we have covered since we started 3 hours ago, I would just pick up some bullet points that jumped out at me to mull over with the audience here. And let me compliment the audience, because if this audience is nothing if not steadfast. You've stayed on all these hours, I think, mainly because you understand the gravitas of the issues. Right in the beginning, Dechen from the UNEP's Asia Pacific office suggested informally a Himalaya Hindu Kush Council, because it is something that they have had in the Arctic region, and why not in the Himalaya Hindu Kush Karakoram? That formula is definitely required. We had Sonam Wangchuk, who talked about his experiences in Ladakh, and that experience will be useful across the ridgeline in Kargil, and across the border in Baltistan. But why stop only to those regions of northern India and northern Pakistan? If you look at the Himalayan swathe from the Hengduan Mountains in Yunnan, 2,500 miles all the way to Baltistan, these are all people who we know as the chamba eaters, people who use roasted barley flour. And that is what connects them. There's so much that could be shared and incorporated across the Himalaya, including Tibet. And there could be some such ideas, and that may then teach a lesson to the rest of South Asia of the importance of collaborating, because the massive volume of people of South Asia is in the plains and in the peninsula. One point I wanted to make, which I did briefly, when we keep talking about electric vehicles, Sunita Narayan was on the dot, on the point, when she mentioned the need to go, electric vehicles need to go, public transport needs to go electric. Because take the example of Kathmandu. Nepal is now the second, after Norway, the second largest by economy and per capita electric vehicle importing country in the world after Norway. 75% of vehicles, private vehicles bought in Nepal last year were electric. However, these electric vehicles run no more than an hour and a half a day at maximum. So if you look at it that way, it's a massive wastage. What we need to do is the parallel evolution of public transport and electric public transport. And in electric public transport, if you could go directly from the grid to the motor without the via media of a battery, that is the world we should be looking back. And somebody would say, oh, but you're talking about trams and trolley buses. That is going backward. No, that is going ahead, the way I see it. So it's important to understand that when Nepal and Bhutan get, at the same time, with this critique of electric private vehicle ownership vis-a-vis public transport, and public transport, of course, will lead to air quality improvements and economic improvement, public transport consolidation. I believe that we must also remember, when we keep talking about EVs in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, for example, all of those EV buses and cars are running on coal, sometimes dirty coal bought from Indonesia. So we must find other solutions as well in terms of alternative ways of utilizing our EVs or powering our EVs. Heat stress has been talked about, but I believe there's one aspect we need to talk about more than has been picked up. The last year when temperature highs reached 50 degrees in the Indo-Gangetic plains, in the Indus-Ganga Maidan, suddenly there is now talk about heat stress. But beyond heat stress, we have to talk about the mass migration that this is going to lead to. That has not yet come into the discourse, as far as I can make out, just as I mentioned in the morning, permafrost has not yet come into the discourse. Finally, federalism in many ways for the two large countries of South Asia seems to be the answer in many ways for the rest of South Asia. And this goes beyond the climate crisis and air quality, etc. But what we heard from the minister was very important here from from Punjab province. Lots of work evidently has been done, but not enough of that has been shared with the rest of South Asia. So to me, that is important. Likewise, what you heard from Sunita Narayan, presenting very positive aspects of work done by the Indian government on that side, perhaps has not been shared enough on this side. So I'm very sorry that Sunita took unwell and could not be here with us. But it seems to me, therefore, that if we have Delhi government, Punjab, Indian Punjab, Pakistani Punjab, if they begin talking to each other, and I know the Chief Minister of Punjab in Pakistan has talked about talking across the border, but we do know that each of these provinces and states have to go through the national governments, and therein lies the rub, that South Asia has not been able to come together because of the animosities or the standoffishness of individual capitals. left to themselves, the local governments and the provincial governments probably would have solved many of the problems before us. So coming to Abid Saab's suggestion that I say a few words on what could SAARC do on this matter. SAARC is an entity that we all love to denigrate. Because if we want to act as if we know more than somebody else, we say, SAARC, it doesn't work. But the attitude should be, SAARC is an entity of South Asia that proves the buy-in of the elite political classes to the idea of regionalism. For that reason alone, SAARC is important, beyond what it should and can do. So what do we need to do for SAARC as an institution? We need to help organize and lobby for the 19th summit, because SAARC is resuscitated with every summit. And the last summit happened in 2014, November. And we need to have it, and it is slated for Islamabad. And there should be no shriveling violets on this topic. We should be able to speak loudly. Regionalism is important for climate crisis, among other things, and migration crisis, public health crisis, vector crisis, whatever you call it. So my answer, my suggestion would be that we generate a voice for SAARC to continue to exist to begin with, and to be well funded, and not to be locked into this consensus rule. But I'm now going too deep into SAARC. Let me back away from that and say just one other point. The term People's SAARC has been talked about. It's so expensive to meet, and when we do meet, the people, meaning civil society of SAARC, meets before every summit, but it has become too pro forma. And I would say, taking up from what Dawn has done with this conclave here, perhaps it's time now for us to go beyond the formulaic People's SAARC and have a genuine South Asian movement, as Harjit also mentioned, some way to not let go of this ideal that we have, because we have to talk across borders. And that brings me to my last point, which is to do with this conclave here. Remember, COP28 and 29 were essentially hosted by petrochemical producing states. And because the COPs were so important, this issue was not raised enough. But it's time to take the momentum away and the initiative away from the actual producers and the consumers of massive amounts of petrochemicals. It's time for regions such as the initiative. How do we do that? Frankly, many people have tried. There was a generation that survived on donor funding to meet. And what I realized with donor-funded meetings over the 80s and 90s and 2000s is they exist just as long as the donors' fund exists. The moment the spigot is turned up, the initiative dies. And so many South Asia meetings where people used to meet all the time, but the sum was never more than the part. My suggestion is, I have no exact answer, but from what Harjit said and what other panelists have said in this panel and earlier, we must try to find a way to meet across borders. We know that the internet allows us facilities to talk, but it seems physical meetings are important, such as this one. So we have to somehow pick up from where Dawn Media has left us with Breathe, Pakistan Breathe, and we must take it further to Breathe South Asia Breathe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kanad Saab, and thank you to all our panelists. With that concludes Day 1's proceedings of Dawn Media Breathe Pakistan International Climate Change Conference. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, same time, same place. Thank you for joining us.